What are we going to talk about this week, Anthony?
Well, I think we have to talk about Iran, and we have to talk about the president's decision to go in Iran and the reaction of the American people. You go first, Katty. How do you think it's going for the president, and how do you think it's going for the administration? And could you talk a little bit about Pete Hegseth? Because as an American, I've had very embarrassing things happen to me, but I could not have been more shamed or embarrassed by this person's speech, conversation, monologue yesterday. But go ahead.
I was texting you yesterday, right, about Pete Hegseth.
Unhinged Pete Hegseth.
Excruciating it was to listen to him, particularly when he was asked about American service members who have been killed during this conflict, the 6 Americans who have been killed so far. He was being asked about that by the press. And what does he do? He attacks the press, which Caroline Leavitt then did as well in the White House press briefing room. Hegseth has decided just that this is an opportunity for him to talk to Donald Trump and, I guess, show Donald Trump that he's in his corner every moment. And he's turning it into a nonstop attack of the press, a rah-rah, we've sunk everything, we've attacked everything, we're going to go on forever, we have total dominance. This is not a fair fight. It was not meant to be a fair fight. I get it. He's the Secretary of Defense. He likes to call himself the Secretary of War. And the role of the Secretary of the Defense in a press briefing is to tout the success of the military operation. But if you compare Pete Hegseth's performance yesterday to that of General Dan Kane, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who was sober, talking about the military aspect of this, immediately the first thing he did when he took the podium was to pay tribute and name the 6 fallen soldiers, reservists who have been killed in the region. It was night and day compared to Pete Hegseth. And Pete Hegseth sounded like it was a sort of clown show. Really, I don't know how else to describe it, of ego and bombast and an American prowess and rah-rah. And there was General Kane very calmly talking about the situation as it is, and therefore having far more credibility, I felt, when it came to actually telling Americans how this war is going.
Yeah, listen, I was horrified. It was literally like a rhetorical orgy of Fox News hosts, as if they all got together and said, what kind of bombast can we put into a speech for a guy playing the Secretary of Defense?
Yeah, it was a show.
I think it took away from some of the things that he said, by the way, because there were some things that he said, Katty, that seemed to be true. And when you're doing your reporting, I'm doing my reporting. They have put a hurt on the Iranian missile capability, launch capability. They put a hurt on the air defenses of Iran. Obviously, they sunk a naval vessel, and maybe 10 other naval vessels have been taken out of commission by the American Navy and the American military. And from the reporting in Tel Aviv that the alarms are going off less, and there are less missile strikes there in other parts of the Gulf. So it seems to be working. What the plan does seem to be working.
What the military plan was, and I think
yes, the execution of the military plan seems to be working. But I guess my question to you about that is, what does the West, what does the United States, what does Israel get out of this plan?
So I think those are all the right questions, Anthony. And I agree with you. My reporting is that militarily, this seems to be going very well. It's worth everybody, by the way, reading Karl Rove in the Wall Street Journal this morning, because he is making the point that this is going very well militarily, but there is such a deficit when it comes to American opinion polls on this, because the president has not done a good job of explaining a coherent narrative. And the narrative is still slightly all over the place. We had the president yesterday saying, well, they were 2 weeks away from making a nuclear bomb. I've tried to see if I could get anyone in the intelligence community to stand that up, but nobody's going to say that that was the case, particularly after the events of last June. So I think where we are, this snapshot when we're recording on Thursday morning, both of us seem to agree, and we mentioned this last week, that this could work militarily. This seems to be going in America and Israel's favor militarily. They have not, because of the strikes from Iran against the Gulf states, they have not lost their Gulf allies. In fact, they've probably pulled their Gulf allies closer to them. There are some big questions out there. I think there are still questions about that girls' school that you and I mentioned. Pete Hegseth was asked about that yesterday. Again, he kind of refused to answer, just said it's an investigation. We're getting lots of other military details, but curiously, they can't give us details about that girls' school. But I think that they have not done a good job of selling this to the American public. And I think we are beginning to see fractures in the MAGA coalition that have been exacerbated over the last couple of days. And we're seeing these war votes play out on Congress. I don't know how particularly important those are, but there's a lot of skepticism around the country. You've got the latest opinion polls are suggesting 60% disapproval, 40% approval for the operation in Iraq. Now, I know polls can depend on how you ask the question. Some other polls, CBS polls, is a little closer than that. But that's not a great position for a president to be in when he's only got 40% approval in the days when the military operation is going successfully. My memory of military operations over the last 20, 30 years in America has been in the days at the beginning, you get a rally around the flag effect, you get a rally around the commander-in-chief effect, and particularly when it's going well, you get a spike in support for the military operation that then reflects on the president. I don't think we're seeing that for this president at the moment. There are still a lot of Americans who are asking themselves, why are we doing that? And they're asking why are we doing that because the case hasn't been made coherently. And the case is all over the place, right, Anthony?
Yeah. I mean, I just want to add a couple of stats, which I think people will be interested in. 68% of the independents are against it.
I love this. You've dug into the crosstabs. We love a crosstab on the rest of
Well, we have to do that because the independents are really going to decide the midterms and decide the 2028 election. So almost 70% of them are like, this is absurd. This is ridiculous. You know, the other thing you should know, Katty, and you probably do know this, but I want to share this with people. 12% of the Americans favor sending troops to Iran. 12%. Can you imagine that? Imagine how crazy that is. And he's talking about it. Now, I'm not saying he's going to do it, but I mean, there's no room for him in this, meaning he doesn't have unshakable support from even his base on what he's doing here. So if this is so good for America, why are so many Americans against it?
Hey guys, thank you so much for listening. We love having you with us. We can only bring you this content though if you will subscribe. It really helps us to carry on telling this extraordinary moment that we're in. So please just hit that subscribe button. I think it's because the case hasn't been made. The president has put out various ideas. We're doing this because we were about to be attacked. An attack was imminent. Marco Rubio has said we're doing this because Israel was about to attack. And so then we would have been counterattacked and we have to do it. We're doing that because they were 2 weeks away from a nuclear weapon. That's the latest explanation. Meanwhile, Americans are thinking this has nothing to do with my cost of living. In fact, cost of living has got worse because of this operation. So why are we out there thousands of miles away trying to take down the Iranian regime when it doesn't feel to Americans like there was an imminent threat? I think one thing that is worth saying is that there is the traditional, the old Republican position that you would have remembered, Anthony, would have been hawkish on Iran. There's not a lot of love lost for the fact that the Ayatollah has been taken out or that Iran is getting punched on the nose. So you've got this kind of discrepancy between Donald Trump, who is saying, I came in to stop the forever wars, but now has become the commander-in-chief who goes for Venezuela, who threatens Greenland, who actually goes for Iran not once but twice in the course of the last year, and puts himself seemingly at odds with his MAGA America First base, which voted for him because they said they didn't want the forever wars. And yet, scratch into Congress, I think, where you're seeing this support for Donald Trump at the moment. And there is still in the Republican Party a desire for America to lead and a desire for America to hit America's enemies, particularly Iran, which has been an enemy for so long. So I think it's a more complicated picture than perhaps the polling is suggesting. And I think there is this rump of traditional republicanism on foreign policy, on this foreign policy issue, that is helping Donald Trump at the moment. So there are MAGA voices. You're right. There are the Tucker Carlsons, the Marjorie Taylor Greens. There are a bunch of MAGA voices that have come out against this operation, but they tend to be MAGA influencers on the sort of one extreme of the MAGA base. I don't know that he's going to lose MAGA over this.
No, I don't think he loses MAGA over this, but I don't think he's got all of MAGA. I think he's fractured MAGA, and I think he's leaked a little bit of MAGA. But I did a seance last night in preparation for this, and
Did you? How are the ghosts doing? I know, God, you do believe all this. Yeah, I know.
Well, yeah, I channeled the spirit of Dick Cheney.
Oh.
So it took a while because I'm here in Dublin, and I had the sorcerer thing, and Dick came down. He is thrilled, Dick Cheney. Let me just tell you how happy Dick Cheney is.
Very happy.
Dick Cheney is like, this is a neocon's wet dream.
Vindication. Yes.
He cannot believe this. He's like, whoa. We got the reality television star in the White House. Liz didn't want him. I didn't want him. You know, before I moved on, because, you know, Cheney's in purgatory, right? He's not quite in heaven because of all the bad deeds. And he's like, you know, I'm here waiting to see if I can get to...
You can't say that about the dead. You can't say that, Anthony, about the dead. This is the period of Lent. We're heading into Easter. You're a good Catholic.
Well, I'm just letting you know what's going on. And so he's sitting there waiting for St. Peter to let him in the pearly gates. But he's very happy right now because he's like, this is like even better than I thought. And so let me give the unitary executive power pitch. Dick Cheney on steroids, that would be Donald Trump. And remember, just to remind everybody, this is the peace president, Donald Trump. This is the president that was campaigning for the end of forever wars. He has taken the Dick Cheney playbook to the max. And so, as I said last week, what is the Dick Cheney playbook? We're going to behead Iran. We're going to install somebody that we can corrupt, and that's secular. And we're going to see if we can do to Iran what we did to Venezuela. Now, Katty, I am sure of this, and this is not based on reporting. This is based on my gut. And so I'm going to tell you my gut, and then I want you to respond to it. I am sure that Trump is pissed off at the Israelis. And let me explain why. The Israelis have a diverging objective to Donald Trump. The Israelis want to kill everybody. The Israelis have been terrorized by the Iranians. They funded Hamas. They created this fiasco in Gaza. And they've hurt tons and tons of Israelis over the 47 years. And so now that the Israelis have opened fire like this, they're killing everybody. I mean, they went through the top 40 in like 5 minutes, okay, of the senior leadership. And Trump is very pissed off about this.
Including, by the way, the senior leadership that he was hoping to put back in there after they'd taken out the very top.
That's my point, because I'm watching the interviews of Trump. He's sitting there in front of the gilded fireplace now. There's like so much gold coming off the fireplace from Home Depot. It's like, that's another revolting thing. But Trump is saying, who am I going to bribe? Trump is basically looking at the media and saying, Bibi killed so many people, I can't figure out which secularist I'm going to bribe. Okay, so that is an opinion by me, and I'd like you to react to that. Go ahead. That was everything from Dick Cheney, by the way, and then I let his spirit go back into
he went back up.
Yes, he went back up, yes, or down, wherever he may have gone, actually. I'm not sure. But go ahead. What is your opinion of that?
Next time we need to know what's happening, we're going to call up, your seance situation. Look, I think that one of the most honest things that was said this week was when Marco Rubio came down and in this very kind of mangled way said the quiet part out loud and said the Israelis were going to go for it. And so we had to jump in there in case we got hit, and we didn't want to get hit inadvertently. So we thought, well, we better join the Israelis and make sure that we were protecting ourselves. I think that Bibi has been, I understand, in the White House nonstop, pushing Donald Trump to do this, obviously. But Donald Trump could have said no. Now, I had reporting this morning of somebody who'd had lunch with Donald Trump a month ago in Mar-a-Lago who said he was gagging to strike Iran. Bibi was clearly pushing. They could have said no to Bibi. They chose not to say no to Bibi, but maybe Rubio wanted to use that as the excuse. Israel was pushing. Maybe Rubio has his own reasons for saying that. And they could have definitely said no to Bibi and not let him do it. But I think Donald Trump came out of Venezuela feeling, as many presidents do when they see the awesome power of the American military, high on the power of American power. He loves power anyway. He loves to prove his predecessors were weak and stupid and wrong. That's a constant theme with his presidency. They didn't do this because they were too weak to do this. You and I have been doing this series on Donald Trump. He loves to show that he is the only person that can fix things. Only Donald Trump had the balls to go after Iran and punch them where it hurt and actually kind of obliterate their military machine. Only I have done this thing that's impossible. And you know what? However this turns out, at this point, he declares a win. Short of massive American casualties, which, looking at what you and I are hearing from the region, looking at the military situation at the moment, they seem to have avoided that so far, fingers crossed. But short of massive American casualties, Donald Trump can go to the American public and say, anything is better than what was there. I don't really care about what regime comes next, what their ideology is, so long as this is a regime. But look, American public, they don't have access now to their nuclear weaponry. They don't have access to their ballistic missiles that were pointed at our US bases in the region. And he doesn't care about whether the Iranian population rises up and takes over, which is probably going to lead to a bloodbath for the Iranian population. But the problem is, it doesn't get America out of a Cold War that it's been with in Iran since 1979. It's still going to be in a Cold War. It just won't have the weapons. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's enough for him to be able to sell this reasonably plausibly as a win to the American public.
Okay, so before we go to another topic, I just want to throw a few more things at you because I'm looking for Delcy Rodriguez.
Yeah, you probably killed her, by the way.
Yeah, so that's what Trump said, okay? And this is the beauty of Trump. He literally said, well, the attack was so successful, it knocked out most of the candidates. It's not going to be anybody that we were thinking of because they're all dead. Second and third place is dead. Those are literally Trump's words. But I'm going to throw out two people to you. Okay, one is Hassan Khomeini. This is the grandson of the ruler, obviously, that was taken out earlier in the week. And he seems to be more secularized and he seems to be more pragmatic. Now, I'm not saying that's the direction he's going to go in or not. And then the other one, I would say, is Ali Larijani. Am I saying his name right? He's probably the most powerful transitional figure that's left alive right now.
He's probably been running the country for the last year, by the way.
Yeah, and he's probably running the country. And maybe he's not dead because the Israelis don't want to kill him, if we're just being brutally honest with everybody. And he's more or less, I think, run the country, National Security, Supreme National Security Council. He's the one that's worked with the Europeans and the Chinese, and he has some technocratic credibility. So my question to you is this somebody that could work with Donald Trump? And now, as I'm saying that to you, remember the Israelis, they don't mind failed states. They like the failed state of Lebanon. They don't mind the failed state of Syria. And they ideally would like this to be a partitioned failed state. Trump does not want that. We both know that. So the question is, which direction is it going in? And do either of those two people sound like to you as potentially people that Donald Trump and the Americans could deal with?
I think it's potentially, one of those two, assuming they stay alive for a while, because these bombardments are continuing and the Israelis are going after the security forces, and the Americans, Hegseth has said, we're going to step up the bombardments over the next day or two. What Trump seems to be looking for is kind of, Iran's Deng Xiaoping, right? The post-Mao leader who America can deal with. I have a question about the Iranian society, though, because I've reached out to a couple of Iranian friends over the last few days and people who are Iranian but live abroad. And they say Iranian society is so fed up with the model that they've had that will they accept anything that is adjacent to that model? Will they be satisfied with the Larijani? Will they be satisfied with Khamenei's offspring? They are seriously unhappy with the status quo, and will that be something that they can tolerate? Khamenei was very opposed, my understanding is, to reform of any kind because he saw the Soviet model. He thought once you open the door to any kind of reform, Gorbachev style, then all hell breaks loose and you lose the regime. So there aren't very many people around him who were real reformers. I mean, I don't think Delcy Rodriguez was a real reformer, but Venezuela is a very different case. Venezuela has been democratic and pro-American much more recently than Iran has. They've kind of gutted a lot of the leadership anyway, is now still staunchly radicalized. So I think all of those are good questions, and I think we don't know. I mean, there's also these reports that are coming out that the CIA is trying to help the Kurds in the north. Well, the poor Kurds have been through this before, so I hope if the Americans really are saying they're going to support the Kurds, they're going to do a better job of this than they did in the first Gulf War, when they kind of abandoned them. So there are a lot of moving parts in this. Is Trump really trying to foment civil war in the country? Will the Iranian public accept somebody who wears a turban? I mean, let's to put it, bluntly, who comes from the clerical side. Will they accept somebody who has anything to do with the regime like Laranjani does? I mean, it's going to be up to, I guess, having decimated Iran's defenses, it will be up to Israel and America, because they're not going to tolerate somebody who they feel they can't do business with. I think all of this is why Karl Rove is writing this article today in the Wall Street Journal, which is saying, look, we just need a more coherent theory of the case, rather than the prospect of Donald Trump one day clicking his fingers and saying, okay, let's call it quits. We've had a victory. We're done. Because if you leave so many of these questions unanswered, your victory could evaporate.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really insightful analysis, and I'll just add a few things to it. So you have everything you just said, and now you have the big supreme question, Katty, and that is, will whatever's left standing in that government play ball with the Americans?
Yeah.
And I think it's hard to know because they've got a couple of different factions in there, right? Faction one are the pragmatists. They've been severely damaged. These are the ones that were very close in Geneva. They were reporting to reporters that they thought, or they were almost there with a deal. Okay. And then there will be a backstory about that, Jared and Steve Witkoff, because you guys were very close to the deal. But, Bibi didn't want that deal. Bibi wanted to bomb everybody.
Right.
So the pragmatists are there and they are damaged. The second group are the IRGC. These are the hardliners. Mm-hmm. Okay, these guys are also militarily weakened, but they're the ideological maximalists. And the question is, what are we doing with them? And how many of them are left in power? These are the ones that are shooting the rockets at the Gulf states. The foreign minister, you probably heard this, called the foreign minister of Qatar to offer some level of apology. That's not an IRGC thing. That's the pragmatist faction. Right. And the Qatari foreign minister says, hey, you're not just shooting at American bases here. You're blowing up apartment buildings and hotels. Cut it out. So you've got a couple different factions. And this is the one that I want to ask you about, and that is the people, Katty K. Because I think Trump is misreading the people. And hear me out for a second, okay?
The Iranian people?
He is. I think he's misreading them. He's like, go overthrow the government, But then he's also telling the press, where's Delcy Rodriguez 2? Where's Delcy Rodriguez 2? Mm. And I think Trump's going to put himself in a weird position, because I don't think the general population wants a deal with the regime.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's what I was saying. Yeah.
I think they want fundamental change.
I agree.
Which is frankly fundamentally different from Venezuela. So you could be in a situation where, let's say Trump finds Delcy Rodriguez 2, but you have lots of tumult in the place of the people, where they're like, no, that's not what we want. We want a full, renewed Iranian revolution. And I think Trump is misreading that. That's just me personally, because he likes and he enjoys this. He does it to everybody. He talks out of both sides of his mouth. I'm not for forever wars. Let's bomb the living daylights out of these guys like Dick Cheney. I want you guys to overthrow the government. Hey, is there someone in the government I can bribe that I can do business with? And so if he gets the guy or the person that he can bribe to do business with, I think the people are going to generally be unhappy. Am I wrong in that?
No, I think you're exactly right. It's what I was saying, that they won't tolerate somebody who is regime adjacent. Now, that doesn't mean that we're about to see a huge uprising from the Iranian people. They've been traumatized and brutalized for years, and they're not, at the moment, my understanding is They are absolutely terrified and will not be going out onto the streets because there are regime remnants and security services and IRGC who are walking around with guns who are going to shoot anyone who so much as puts their head above the parapet. And I think you're not likely to see within the next 6 months to a year a huge big rising up of the Iranian population, short of massive American support, which I don't think Donald Trump is going to do. He's just kind of vaguely hoping that they'll do this by themselves because they've been hurt really hard. I mean, I think they're much more likely, the Iranian people right now, to hunker down and try to repair themselves. They're under bombardment right now as we speak. But that doesn't mean that they are happy about the idea of this bombing campaign starting and then being abandoned and this not leading to wholesale regime change. Speaking to people who know the country much better than I do, where we know there's something like only 15% support for the regime, but people are very, very wary there at the moment, and they don't like the idea of America not finishing this job and giving them full. That would be massively disappointing to the Iranian people if we end up with an enfeebled but still Islamic Republic type of regime in the country. That is exactly the last thing that they want.